The president's family just went all in on Bitcoin. Not a small bet, not a side hustle, an entire empire. And in a second, I'm going to show you the part nobody's talking about. But first, hit that like button and subscribe because what you're about to learn is going to change how you see money forever. Listen closely. While you were scrolling Instagram in 2025, the Trump family quietly built one of the largest Bitcoin mining operations in America. Eric and Donald Trump Jr. launched something called American Bitcoin, and by October they were sitting on nearly 4,000 Bitcoin. That's over $300 million. They didn't just buy Bitcoin, they're mining it, creating it, using American energy on American soil to literally print digital gold. But here's where it gets crazy. Trump Media, the company that owns Truth Social, announced they're buying $2.5 billion worth of Bitcoin. You heard that right, $2.5 billion. That's not investment advice money. That's we know something you don't money. And the craziest part is what happens next. Most people never connect these two things. But watch this. The same week Trump Media announced this massive Bitcoin buy, Trump signed an executive order, creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the United States. Not a crypto reserve, a Bitcoin reserve, using 200,000 Bitcoin seized from criminals, worth about $17 billion. It's like Fort Knox, but digital. They're calling it a digital Fort Knox. You might be wondering, why Bitcoin? Why now? Let me show you. The Trump family didn't wake up one day and decide to love crypto. In fact, Donald Trump called Bitcoin a scam back in 2021. 3 years later, he's calling himself the Bitcoin president. What changed? Follow the money. During the 2024 campaign, crypto executives donated millions to Trump. The Winklevoss twins each gave $1 million. Jesse Powell from Kraken, another $1 million. And Trump promised them he'd make America the crypto capital of the planet. This next part is where it gets scary. The Trump family now has 4 separate crypto businesses. 4. American Bitcoin, the mining company. Trump Media's Bitcoin Treasury. World Liberty Financial, their DeFi platform that raised over $500 million. And then there's the Trump meme coin that hit a $14 billion market cap on Inauguration Day before crashing. But even after the crash, the family made over $1 billion in profits from their crypto empire in 2025 alone. You're probably thinking this sounds wild, right? Here's what most people never realize. This isn't just about one family getting rich. This is about power. When the president's own business empire is tied to Bitcoin, what do you think happens to Bitcoin regulations, to Bitcoin adoption? In a second, I'll show you exactly how deep this rabbit hole goes. But first, let me tell you about the other elites who are buying. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world, $12.5 trillion under management. In 2017, Fink called Bitcoin an index for money laundering. Fast forward to December 2025, and Fink is on stage at the New York Times, saying sovereign wealth funds are buying Bitcoin at every price dip. They bought at 120,000. They bought at 100,000. They bought below 90,000. And listen closely. These aren't day traders. These are governments, countries, building long-term positions they plan to hold for years. Watch this. BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, called IBIT, now holds 771,000 Bitcoin. That's $6 to $7 billion worth. And it's not slowing down. In January 2025, BlackRock bought $662 million of Bitcoin in a single day, their largest purchase of the year. Think about that. The guy who called Bitcoin money laundering 7 years ago just bought over $500 million of it in one day. And the craziest part is what happens next. Fink said on live television that if sovereign wealth funds allocate just 2 to 5% of their portfolios to Bitcoin, the price could hit $500,000 to $700,000 per coin. Not a typo. 700,000 from 90,000 today. That's almost an 800% gain. And he's not some random YouTuber saying this. He's the CEO of the company managing more money than most countries have. Here's where it gets really interesting. Abu Dhabi, one of the richest places on earth. Their sovereign wealth funds bought over $1 billion of BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF. The Abu Dhabi Investment Council tripled their holdings in just 3 months. They went from 2.4 million shares to 8 million shares. That's a 230% increase. Oil money is flowing into Bitcoin. You might be wondering, why would countries that literally pump oil out of the ground buy Bitcoin? In a second, I'll tell you the real reason, and it's going to blow your mind. Most people think Bitcoin is just internet money. The elites know it's something completely different. It's a weapon against the dollar. Listen closely. When Larry Fink talks about Bitcoin, He calls it an asset of fear. That sounds negative, right? But here's what he actually means. You buy Bitcoin because you're scared your government is printing too much money, scared your dollar is losing value, scared of inflation, war, economic collapse. Bitcoin is the escape hatch. And the richest people in the world are starting to understand this. This next part is where it gets crazy. Countries like Abu Dhabi sit on mountains of US dollars from selling oil. But what happens when the dollar keeps losing purchasing power? When America prints trillions and trillions of dollars, those countries need somewhere to park their wealth that governments can't control. That's where Bitcoin comes in. It's digital, it's global, and no single country can print more of it. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin, ever. Watch this. Michael Saylor, the guy who runs a company now called Strategy, formerly MicroStrategy. This man has turned his entire business into a Bitcoin buying machine. As of January 2026, Strategy owns 673,000 Bitcoin. Let me say that again, 673,000. That's over 3% of all Bitcoin that will ever exist. At today's prices, that's worth over $60 billion. But here's what most people never realize about Saylor's strategy. He's not using his own money. He's selling stock, issuing debt, raising billions and billions of dollars from investors who want Bitcoin exposure, and then using that money to buy more Bitcoin. He's literally built a money printer. But instead of printing dollars, it prints Bitcoin ownership. In December 2025 alone, Strategy bought over 10,000 Bitcoin per week. That's almost $1 billion in Bitcoin every 7 days. And the craziest part is what happens next. Saylor has a plan called 40 to 42. 42 billion in stock sales, 42 billion in debt. His goal is to own over 1 million Bitcoin by the end of 2026. Think about that. 1 million Bitcoin is almost 5% of the entire supply. One company, 5% of all Bitcoin ever. You're probably thinking, wait, if one guy owns that much, isn't that dangerous? Here's the thing nobody tells you. Saylor isn't keeping his Bitcoin in his personal wallet. It's on Strategy's balance sheet, which means institutions, pension funds, regular investors can get exposure to Bitcoin just by buying Strategy stock. In fact, the Louisiana State Employees Retirement System just revealed they own Strategy shares. A government pension fund is now indirectly betting on Bitcoin. This next part is where it gets scary. In 2020, Saylor started this whole thing when Bitcoin was around $10,000. He bought for $125 million worth since then. Bitcoin has gone to over 100,000. His original investment is now worth billions. But he didn't stop. He kept buying. At 20,000, at 30,000, 50,000, 70,000, 100,000. Every single dip, he buys more. And other billionaires are watching. Let me show you exactly who else is buying. Israel Englander runs a hedge fund called Millennium Management. He put $1.3 billion into Bitcoin ETFs. That's his second largest position. Tudor Jones, another billionaire hedge fund manager, $275 million in Bitcoin. Alan Howard, $2.3 billion. That's 25% of his entire fund. 1/4 of a billionaire's portfolio is Bitcoin. Let that sink in. Here's where it gets really interesting. These aren't crypto brothers. These are Wall Street titans. Goldman Sachs holds $1.5 billion in Bitcoin. Morgan Stanley, almost $500 million. Morgan Chase, the same bank whose CEO called Bitcoin a fraud, now has exposure through clients. The biggest banks in the world are quietly stacking Bitcoin, while telling regular people to be careful. You might be wondering, what do they know that we don't? In a second, I am going to show you the one thing that could send Bitcoin to $1 million. And it has nothing to do with technology. The game changed when governments started playing, not regulating, playing, actually buying Bitcoin for themselves. Watch this. El Salvador was the first country to make Bitcoin legal tender in 2021. Everyone laughed, called it a joke, a poor country buying internet money. But here's what nobody saw coming. El Salvador bought the dip. Every time Bitcoin crashed, their president, Nayib Bukele, would tweet one word, buying, and he'd add more Bitcoin to the country's treasury. As of 2025, El Salvador owns over 6,000 Bitcoin. At today's prices, that's worth over $500 million. A small country turned their national savings into Bitcoin. But that was just the beginning. This next part is where it gets crazy. In early 2025, Trump signed an executive order for America's strategic Bitcoin reserve. 200,000 Bitcoin from government seizures, worth $17 billion. But But here's the part nobody talks about. That's just the start. The original plan was to buy up to 1 million Bitcoin. If America actually does that, if the US government starts buying Bitcoin on the open market, what do you think happens to the price? Listen closely. Kathy Wood from ARK Invest said Trump has all kinds of reasons to buy Bitcoin. Before the 2026 midterms, think about it. Trump's family owns Bitcoin mining operations. His media company owns Bitcoin. His sons run crypto businesses. If Bitcoin goes up, the Trump empire gets richer. And if the US government creates massive demand by buying 1 million coins, guess what happens? Prices explode. And the craziest part is what happens next. Other countries will have to follow. If America builds a Bitcoin reserve, China has to respond. Russia has to respond. The European Union, Japan, every major economy. It becomes a race. Whoever has the most Bitcoin has the most power in the new financial system. This isn't about technology anymore. It's about geopolitics. Here's what most people never connect. Remember when Larry Fink said sovereign wealth funds are buying? He wasn't guessing. BlackRock has partnerships with Saudi Arabia's public investment fund. They manage money for Abu Dhabi, for Qatar, for some of the richest governments on earth. These aren't public announcements. These are quiet accumulations. Countries buying Bitcoin through ETFs, through BlackRock. So nobody knows exactly how much they own. You might be wondering, why the secrecy? Watch this. If everyone knew exactly how much each country owned, it would cause panic. Imagine if tomorrow China announced they own 500,000 Bitcoin, or Russia, or Saudi Arabia. The price would skyrocket overnight. So they buy slowly, quietly, through intermediaries. And by the time the world realizes what happened, it's too late. The Bitcoin has already been bought. This next part is where it gets really interesting. Europe joined the game. Luxembourg's sovereign wealth fund became the first in the Eurozone to directly allocate to Bitcoin in October 2024. Not through an ETF, direct ownership. They're literally holding Bitcoin in cold storage like gold bars in a vault. Other European countries are watching, studying, planning their own moves. Let me show you the math that makes this insane. There are about $13 trillion in sovereign wealth funds globally. That's money countries have saved up from oil, taxes, trade surpluses. If just 2% of that goes into Bitcoin, that's $260 billion of new buying pressure. If 5%, $650 billion. Remember, Bitcoin's total market cap today is less than $1 trillion. Imagine $650 billion trying to buy into a $2 trillion market. Supply and demand says prices have to go vertical. Here's where it gets scary. There's only 21 million Bitcoin total, ever. About 19 million have been mined already, but millions are lost forever. People forgot their passwords, hard drives in landfills. Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin's creator, owns about 1 million that hasn't moved since 2010. So, realistically, there might only be 14 or 15 million Bitcoin actually available to buy. And governments, billionaires, institutions are all trying to get their hands on as much as possible. You're probably thinking, this sounds like a massive bubble, right? Here's what the elites know that most people don't. In a second, I'll show you why this might just be getting started. The dollar is dying. The elites are running. Listen closely. America's national debt just passed $35 trillion. Trillion, with a T. The government pays over $1 trillion in interest, alone every single year. That's more than the entire defense budget. And here's the part that should terrify you. There's no plan to pay it back. The only option is to print more dollars, which means every dollar you own is worth less and less. This next part is where it gets crazy. Larry Fink calls Bitcoin and gold assets a fear. You buy them when you're worried about your money losing value, when you don't trust your government, when you think the system is breaking. And right now, the richest people in the world are very, very worried. That's why they're moving billions into Bitcoin. Watch this. In 2021, inflation was supposed to be transitory, temporary. The Federal Reserve said prices would come back down. They didn't. Food cost more. Gas cost more. Houses cost more. Your money buys less. And when regular people start feeling it, you know the elites saw it coming years ago. That's why they started buying Bitcoin in 2020, 2021, 2022. Before you even heard about inflation on the news. Here's what most people never realize. Bitcoin has a hard cap, 21 million coins. No government can decide to print more. No Federal Reserve can inflate the supply. It's code, it's math, it's final. Compare that to dollars. The US printed more than 20% of all dollars in existence in just 2 years during COVID. 20% in 2 years. Imagine if Bitcoin could do that. It can't. That's the whole point. And the craziest part is what happens next. As more people realize this, as more institutions understand this, the demand for Bitcoin goes exponential. Because unlike dollars, Bitcoin is scarce. There's only so much to go around. And when billionaires, when countries, when pension funds all want a piece, the math gets insane. You might be wondering, okay, but what about the risks? What if Bitcoin crashes? Let me show you something. In 2017, Bitcoin hit $20,000, then crashed to $3,000. An 85% drop. Everyone said it was dead, worthless. Then it came back, hit $69,000 in 2021, crashed again to $16,000 in 2022. Another 77% drop. Dead again, right? Wrong. Now it's back over 90,000 and climbing. Here's the pattern nobody talks about. Bitcoin crashes. Hard, painful, 90% drops. But every time it comes back, it goes higher than before. Why? Because the fundamentals haven't changed. The supply is still capped. Governments still print money. Inflation still eats purchasing power. And more people wake up to the truth every single cycle. This next part is where it gets really interesting. Michael Saylor, the guy with 670,000 Bitcoin, he's not worried about crashes. You know why? Because he's thinking in decades. Not days, not months, decades. He said Bitcoin could hit $13 million per coin by 2045. 13 million. That sounds crazy until you realize he has been right about Bitcoin for 5 years straight while everyone else was wrong. Listen closely. Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter and Block, he owns Bitcoin too. He said Bitcoin could hit $1 million by 2030. 1 million. That's just 5 years away. Cathie Wood said the same thing. These aren't random people. These are billionaires who have access to data, to research, to models that regular people never see. And they're all saying the same thing. Bitcoin is going much, much higher. Here's where it gets scary. If Bitcoin really does become the global reserve asset, if countries really do start stockpiling it like gold, we're talking about $100 trillion market cap, maybe more. At 21 million coins, that's almost $5 million per Bitcoin. Sound impossible? Gold has a market cap of about 15 trillion. Real estate is over 300 trillion. Art, collectibles, all the wealth in the world is hundreds of trillions of dollars. If even a small fraction moves to Bitcoin, the numbers get astronomical. You're probably thinking, but what if governments ban it? What if they make Bitcoin illegal? Here's the thing nobody tells you. They can't, not anymore. In a second I'll show you why Bitcoin is already too big to kill. It's too late to stop it. The elite's already won. Watch this. In 2025, Bitcoin ETFs in the United States saw over $60 billion in inflows. 60 billion. That's regular people. Pension funds, institutions buying through traditional stock markets. Bitcoin is now on Wall Street. It's in retirement accounts. It's in college savings plans. You can't just ban it without causing financial chaos. And here's what most people never realize. The same politicians who could ban Bitcoin, their campaigns were funded by crypto executives. Trump took millions from the industry. So, did dozens of senators and congressmen. You think they're going to kill the golden goose? No. They're going to regulate it, control it, tax it, but not ban it, because they're invested in it too. This next part is where it gets crazy. China banned Bitcoin completely, shut down all the mining, all the exchanges, kicked out the industry. What happened? Bitcoin went up because the network kept running. Miners moved to America, to Kazakhstan, to other countries. China banned it and lost all influence over the network. America learned from that mistake. Instead of banning Bitcoin, they're trying to dominate it. Listen closely. Trump said all future Bitcoin should be mined on American soil, American energy, American control. That's not a ban. That's a takeover. America wants to own Bitcoin mining so badly that they're loosening environmental regulations to make it easier. Fossil fuel companies are partnering with Bitcoin miners. This is industry. This is infrastructure. You don't build infrastructure for something you're about to ban. And the craziest part is what happens next. As America builds mining power, as the strategic Bitcoin reserve grows, as Wall Street gets more involved, Bitcoin becomes too embedded in the system to remove. It becomes part of the economy, part of the financial structure. And once that happens, it's permanent. Here's where it gets really interesting. Eric Trump said something fascinating. He said they realized how punitive banks were in America. Capital One pulled their accounts. Morgan pulled their accounts. Bank of America pulled their accounts. The Trump family got debanked. So they turn to Bitcoin. They turn to crypto. Because banks can freeze your account. Governments can seize your assets. But Bitcoin, if you control the private keys, nobody can touch it. You might be wondering, is that really why they went all in? Watch this. It's not just about money. It's about power. It's about control. When you hold Bitcoin, you hold value outside the traditional system, outside government reach, outside bank control. For billionaires, for countries, that's incredibly valuable. It's insurance against the system failing, against banks collapsing, against currencies dying. This next part is where it gets scary. In 2023 and 2024, multiple banks failed in America. Silicon Valley Bank, First Republic, Signature Bank. Billions of dollars lost overnight. People couldn't access their money. The government had to step in. But Bitcoin kept running 24/7. No bailouts needed. No government rescue. The network just works. Here's what the elites figured out. Traditional finance is fragile. It's based on trust. Trust in banks, trust in governments, trust in the system. But when that trust breaks, everything falls apart. Bitcoin doesn't require trust. It's code. It's math. It's a network of computers all around the world that no single entity controls. You can't bail out Bitcoin. You can't bail it in either. It just exists. Let me show you the final piece of the puzzle. Why 2026 specifically? Why are elites buying now? 2 reasons. First, the Bitcoin having happened in 2024. That is when the supply of new Bitcoin being created gets cut in half. Less supply. Say more growing demand. Prices historically go up about 12 to 18 months after a halving. That puts us right in the sweet spot, right now. The second reason is political. Trump is in office. He's pro-Bitcoin. His family profits from Bitcoin. His administration is filled with crypto-friendly people. David Sachs is the White House crypto czar. Regulations are being written that favor Bitcoin, not kill it. This is the window. This is the moment when Bitcoin goes from fringe to mainstream, from alternative to establishment. And the craziest part is what happens next. Once Bitcoin gets to a certain size, once enough countries own it, once enough billionaires hold it, it becomes self-fulfilling. The more people who need Bitcoin to go up, the more support it has, the more it becomes essential. At that point, Bitcoin doesn't need permission anymore. It's just reality. You're probably thinking, so, should I buy Bitcoin? Here's the thing. I'm not a financial advisor. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what the elites are doing. And they're buying billions of dollars, trillions if you count all of them together. They see something, they know something. And in a second, I'll leave you with the question that could change your life. Here's what nobody wants you to understand. This isn't about technology. This isn't about blockchain. This is about the greatest wealth transfer in human history. And you're watching it happen in real time. Watch this. When Trump's family went from calling Bitcoin a scam to building a Bitcoin empire in just 3 years, that tells you everything. When BlackRock CEO went from calling it money laundering to buying $6 to $7 billion worth, that tells you everything. When entire countries start secretly stacking Bitcoin through sovereign wealth funds, that tells you everything. The smart money isn't waiting anymore. Listen closely. The elites have one massive advantage over regular people. Information. They see the data first. They understand the models. They have access to researchers, to economists, to insiders who explain what's really happening. And then they act quietly before you even hear about it on the news. By the time you read about it, they've already bought. This next part is where it gets crazy. Imagine you're Larry Fink. You manage $12.5 trillion. You have meetings with presidents, with central bankers, with the richest people on earth. You see the debt levels. You see the money printing. You see the cracks in the system. And then you look at Bitcoin. Fixed supply. Decentralized. Unstoppable. What would you do? Exactly what he's doing. Buying as much as possible before everyone else figures it out. Here's what most people never realize. The financial system is a game. And the rules are written by the people who win. For decades, the game was simple. Work hard. Save dollars. Retire. But that game is breaking. Dollars lose value. Savings accounts pay nothing. Inflation eats your purchasing power. The old rules don't work anymore. So the elites are writing new rules. And those rules include Bitcoin. And the craziest part is what happens next. As more institutions adopt Bitcoin, as more governments build reserves, Bitcoin stops being the alternative. It becomes the standard. It becomes what everyone measures value against. Not replacing the dollar overnight, but slowly, gradually, becoming the global reserve asset that sits alongside gold, oil, And yes, even dollars. You might be wondering, what does this mean for regular people? Let me show you. If Bitcoin really goes to 500,000 to 1 million to higher, the people who own it now become the new wealthy class. Not because they're smarter, not because they worked harder, but because they understood the game before everyone else. They saw the transfer of wealth happening, and they positioned themselves on the right side of it. This next part is where it gets really interesting. History repeats. In the 1970s, gold went from $35 an ounce to over $800, a 2,300% gain in 1 decade. Why? Because Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. Suddenly, dollars could be printed infinitely. Gold became the safe haven. The people who owned gold got rich. The people who stayed in cash got destroyed by inflation. Listen closely. We're watching the same thing happen again. Except this time it's not gold. It's Bitcoin. The dollar is losing its peg to reality. Governments are printing with no restraint. And the safe haven is digital, borderless, accessible to anyone with an internet connection. You don't need to be a billionaire. You don't need to be a sovereign wealth fund. You just need to see what they see. Here's where it gets scary. The window is closing. Not tomorrow, not next week, but every day that passes, more institutions buy in, more countries add to reserves, more billionaires stack their positions, and every day that happens, there's less Bitcoin available for everyone else. Remember, only 21 million coins, ever. And millions are already locked up forever. The supply crunch is real. You're probably thinking, but what if I'm wrong? What if Bitcoin crashes? What if this whole thing falls apart? Here's the brutal truth. Maybe it does. Maybe Bitcoin goes to zero. But ask yourself this. What are the odds? You've got the president's family all in. You've got BlackRock all in. You've got countries all in. You've got billionaires betting billions. Are they all stupid? Are they all wrong? Or maybe, just maybe, they see the future more clearly than the average person scrolling TikTok. Maybe they understand that when every major economy is drowning in debt, when every currency is being debased, when trust in the system is eroding, you need an exit. And Bitcoin is the exit. This next part is the part that should terrify you. What if you don't buy? What if you sit on the sidelines, watching, waiting, hoping for a better entry point, and it never comes? What if Bitcoin goes to 150,000, 200,000, 500,000, and you're stuck holding dollars that buy less every single year? Here's what the elites figured out. The biggest risk isn't Bitcoin going to zero. The biggest risk is staying in a system that's designed to take your wealth slowly, over time through inflation. Bitcoin might be volatile. It might crash 50% in a month, but at least you have a chance. With dollars, you're guaranteed to lose purchasing power, guaranteed. That's not a risk. That's a certainty. Let me leave you with this. In 2010, a guy spent 10,000 Bitcoin onto pizzas. At the time, that was about $40. Today, those Bitcoin would be worth over $900 million. $900 million for pizza. Everyone laughs at that story. But here's the real lesson. At the time, he had no idea what Bitcoin would become. Nobody did. It was just internet money. Worthless, according to most people. Now ask yourself, what if we're in 2010 right now? What if Bitcoin at $90,000 is the pizza moment of our generation? What if 20 years from now, people look back and say, can you believe Bitcoin was only 90,000? Can you believe people didn't buy? The elites are buying. The countries are buying. The billionaires are buying. The question is, are you? Before you go, drop a comment and tell me, do you think Bitcoin hits 1 million by 2030? Or is this whole thing a bubble about to pop? I want to hear your thoughts. And if this video opened your eyes to what's really happening, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into money, power, and the systems that control our world. The next video is going to blow your mind even harder. See you there.